Impending loss of 550 jobs at Bombardier's railway car plant in Thunder Bay, Ontario has politicians pointing the finger of blame. Let's get some insight now on Bombardier's relationship with government. Aaron Wudrick of Canadian Taxpayers Federation joins us. Good to see you, Aaron.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
So it didn't seem very long after we got, even before the 550 layoffs were confirmed, we had the federal government and the Ontario government pointing fingers at each other. How do you see the situation?
Yeah, it's almost like a ritual at this point, Greg. I mean, you've got politicians. The first thing they do, of course, is profess their concern for the employees, which is a fair thing to do. This is going to impact real people. But the next thing is to cast around for somebody else to blame. And in this case, the Ontario government's blaming the feds. The feds are blaming Ontario. It's a little bit strange when you think about it because this is a private company. And I think a lot of people might be scratching their heads thinking maybe who's to blame is actually Bombardier itself for not delivering trains on time.
I was going to say, because Bombardier, and when it comes to these contracts for the TTC and also for Metrolinx, particularly the TTC, capturing a lot of headlines about the city not being happy with some of their deliveries and the fact that they had to do some fixes. So you see this really as a private company problem, but at the same time, Bombardier has a history, I guess, and people who watch how the government has supported them over the years aren't happy with the situation.
No, you're absolutely right. I think most people would know that if a company doesn't honor its contract, it's going to get a bad reputation. That's going to affect its future business. And that's exactly what's happened here, unfortunately, to the detriment of all those employees. But they also know that this is a company. I think the reason that Bombardier is such a poster child is that this is a company that has had taxpayer support at various levels, at various times over the last few decades. And it always seems no matter what they do, no matter how badly they drop the ball on a contract, there never is a shortage of politicians who want to run to the rescue. And I think there are a lot of Canadians who at this point have pretty much had it and said, what does this company need to do to be taught a lesson, rather than have people say the first thing we need to do is put more taxpayer money on the line to help them out again.
Now, on the other side of that argument, people will say that decades of government support, whether it was grants or whether it was repayable loans or it was the EDC kicking in, we should have more to show for it. So when we see these jobs lost, you say, well, what are we going to do? We've already supported them to this degree. Why should we be seeing people lose their jobs at a place like this?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, the argument all the time is that we need to do this to support jobs, but it seems that as soon as the subsidy runs out, the jobs go too. So I think that should be, if anything, a warning sign for the future that you're just throwing good money after bad when you do this. I mean, let's be clear, the reason they're in this mess is they didn't deliver on contracts, and yet we have politicians from all parties at both levels saying what we need to do right now is give them more contracts. I think most people would find that very strange to reward a company for bad behavior, for incompetence, and give them even more taxpayer money.
Now, even though this is a publicly traded company, ultimately, the way the shares are constructed, we have two very powerful families who are calling the shots there. Is that part of it too, when you take a look at Bombardier and the government supports they've been getting, that a lot of people have called for a change in the way this company is run? Who's accountable to who?
No, that's exactly it. I think that if this was a company that was subject to normal market forces, if there was a change in ownership, if it was perhaps restructured, taken over, broken up, whatever, you could really improve things. It's not like that Bombardier doesn't make any good products and that they don't have any good employees. They have lots of both. The problem is that management of this company and executives of this company and the owners of this company have learned that no matter what they do, they can screw up as much as they want, and politicians will be there with taxpayer money to ride to the rescue.
Now, in terms of not only Bombardier, but the broader sector, we know that governments around the world, they will support domestic industry to a certain degree. What would you say is a healthy amount of support? Where we know we want to grow companies, we want to foster growth in our country, but at the same time, I get the sense when you and I talk about Bombardier that is a step too far.
Yeah, look, we take a pretty hard line on this stuff. We think the best way to attract businesses is to have simply low taxes and smart regulation. If you make it so attractive to come here and you don't need to subsidize businesses, I think that is a long-term sustainable path. But, I think the other thing, too, is for the people who like to focus on the fact that Bombardier is in Ontario, so, if we have to buy trains, why not build them here? You also have to remember that every extra dollar we spend on Bombardier, if someone else could do it cheaper and better, that's money that we could spend on other things. So there is a benefit to the rest of us as well when you actually look for the best value for taxpayers rather than just focusing on one particular company.
Does that become harder, though, when you say that there's an argument to be made for public funds to go with the bidder who's going to give you the best value, whether they're homegrown or not? But then we have the Americans who are clearly not shy about saying buy American. Again, does that put Canada at a disadvantage when the Americans are fully willing to do that kind of thing?
Sure, I think it's a race to the bottom in that sense. When every country is protectionist in terms of business, that's bad for everyone. And I understand politically it's difficult to push back on that. But there's no getting around the fact that if you spend more than you have to on something, that leaves less money for everything else. And I think politicians need to do a better job making that case. It's fine to play for the home team if there's a business case as well. But if you're actually throwing money down the hole just to help out the home team, that does have costs elsewhere throughout the economy and for politicians.
All right, Aaron, thanks for joining us as always.
Thank you.
That was Aaron Wudrick. He's the Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation.